Welcome back. This is part 2 of our podcast from January 23rd, 2013. Again, this is I Think You Think. I'm Justin. Other side of my computer screen is
James.
There you go. Let's try that one again. Threw that one in. All right. I'm Justin, and on the other side of my computer screen,
James.
That is correct. This is I Think You Think. We are a podcast that focuses on what we think as your hosts and what you guys think. There are ways to contact us. See part 1. Links are in the underbar. We're moving right on to our topic, marijuana legalization. That is something that's been going on here in Illinois for several years. It has been being discussed. In fact, they were talking about doing some sort of vote during our lame duck session in January, and the information that I found shows that they did not actually do that. So it will be pushed on, it looks like, to the next our next Congress. So there are different aspects to marijuana legalization, whether it's legalization for just medicinal purposes, legalization of marijuana in general, some sort of regulation of it, or a decriminalization of small amounts of marijuana, people who don't intend to sell it or deal it, people who are just using it for recreational purposes, as much as that happens with any kinds of drugs. I have my personal feelings about it. James, I'm sure, does have his. But we're going to just dive right in. And you know what? We'll start. How about you, James? Why don't you kind of dive in with your thoughts on it?
Well, for me, I guess if I was to just go with pro or con, I would say I am pro marijuana legalization. It's not that much of a black and white issue where I can just say that and not have more to say about the subject. I worry about the fact, like, okay, if somebody gets drunk and drives, we have the breathalyzer test so we can know. If someone smokes a big bag of weed and drives, we don't have the equivalent to the breathalyzer to know that. And, if someone is, exceeding a certain amount where it's now become a problem where they are a risk to other people and they are driving a vehicle, I do think it's important that we have some sort of accurate test. It might turn out eventually that it's not even a test that you get the answer to right away, but something that, you can find out, 24 hours, 48 hours later. In that case, I would assume that the penalties would probably be much harsher. But I feel like that for me is kind of the biggest missing piece to just, complete legalization, which I don't know if that's realistic to ever get there in this country. Decriminalization, I think, is something a little more realistic. And medical use of, for people with terminal diseases and cancer, from what I understand, it can be pretty helpful. I understand that the reality is that there is a decent number of people that take advantage of that system in the states where it is already legal for medicinal purposes, which is a few. It looks like 7 states, maybe 8 states or so, when I'm looking at my map here on the legality of cannabis in U.S. by state on Wikipedia. But there are people that are taking advantage of it, but I think the advantage it gives to those that rightfully maybe need it or deserve that right, at least in my opinion, probably outweighs, the people that are slipping through the cracks in the system. Those people would, be finding their marijuana one way or the other. They would be buying from somebody off the streets if it wasn't medical. So I don't think that's a big deal. I don't know. What are your thoughts on it, Justin?
I'd never even. You had brought up the laws for driving under the influence, and that we do have an easy way to test for that with like a breathalyzer. And I'd never even thought about that. I guess I've always maybe because I'm an idealist. I've always thought, oh well, if people are going to use it, they're going to use it responsibly, which I guess is kind of silly to even think. that that's necessarily the way it would take place. At the very least, for medicinal purposes, I'm for it. Like, I think that that's perfectly fine. I think that that should definitely be something that takes place. We have drugs right now that are what are known as control. There are different levels of drugs. I work for a retail company that has a pharmacy, and I am now I'm giving credentials. I am a I have a pharmacy tech license for the state of Illinois, and I'm a certified by the, I can't remember what they're called, but pharmacy something. Something. Yeah, I can even write something after my name too because I'm certified in it, but I don't remember what it is, and I never do, so it doesn't really matter. But either way, I do spend some time in pharmacies, and there are controlled substances in pharmacies, and the different levels of drugs go anywhere from C1, C2, C3, all the way up to 5. But the ones that the government really cares about are these different levels. C1s are illegal. They are controlled substances that you do not get in pharmacies. C2s will always be locked up in a pharmacy. The pharmacist is the only one who has access to it. The pharmacist is the one who will get it out and give it to the tech or count it themselves, depending on the state law. 3s, 4s, and 5s are not locked up, but do have to be double counted and things like that. There are certain laws and regulations regarding those things. So all that to say, there are drugs that we carry in pharmacies right now that have more of a detrimental effect on your brain chemistry and your capability of running a motor vehicle right now that we dispense in pharmacies through doctors' prescriptions. And so I don't really see a difference with marijuana. I have also, and this is by no means a authority on the subject, but I did watch the documentary called Super High Me.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
I saw that. Yeah.
Okay. It's sort of a parody, not really a parody, but they took the same idea of the Super Size Me, in which the gentleman ate only fast
McDonald's,
food.
yeah.
Was it just McDonald's? Okay.
It was just McDonald's, 3 meals a day.
For 30 days, and how it affected him. I never watched it because I'm afraid it'll turn me off to eating fast food, which I guess is kind of the point. But Super High Me is basically the same idea. The guy gets high on marijuana in various forms for 30 days, and how it they do some medical tests before and some medical tests after. Now, first of all, obviously, in any kind of a scientific study, a single individual and how they react to something is by no means a definite, example of something that you could cite and say, see, his heart rate went down and his blood pressure went down in 30 days. So therefore, marijuana brings down your blood pressure and your heart rate and makes you more healthy. You can't say that. I mean, you'd have to have a study of 300 people or something to even get close. And all you would say is that there's a prevalence for. Anyway, I'm rambling now. Medical marijuana, I think, is the way to go. I do think that in the states where it currently there is some abuse. I would hope that some sort of regulation could help to govern that. I know that a lot of the abuse stems from things like you could just go to a psychologist and say, you've been feeling depressed, and the psychologist will just write you a prescription for this. And so people kind of abuse that. Now, how much that's true, I don't know. But I would imagine if we treat it the same way we do like oxycodone, then I would imagine we would have less problems with it. As to whether or not it should be legal for anybody to use, where just over a certain age, if you're over 18, you can walk into any store and buy cigarettes, and you could buy as many as you want as long as you've got the money for it. And they won't, they're not going to stop the sale unless you can't provide an ID or they think the ID is fake or something, which they have the right to do. Same thing with alcohol. As long as you aren't acting drunk, you can pretty much buy as much alcohol as you want, and they're not going to stop you. and people are left up to their own devices to determine if they're using too much or too little or too little. Nice. I'm not using enough alcohol.
This isn't working at all.
uh, but I would say that personally, if they did legalize marijuana tomorrow, across the board, like it's not illegal federally or anything, it's like legal, the way nicotine or alcohol is. I would probably treat it roughly the same way I do alcohol. I drink it from time to time. I don't make a habit of it. I probably drink 2 or 3 drinks a month. With marijuana, it would probably be more like one every month, and it would definitely be on days that I was off and I didn't have anything to do. That I didn't know. I know I didn't need to go anywhere. Much in the same way with alcohol, I don't say, oh, my son's got a swimming lesson in a half hour. I'm gonna go drink, 3 shots of vodka and then we'll drive him down. So that's the way I would probably approach marijuana. So yeah, there you go.
Well, I think making the comparison, between marijuana and alcohol is a solid one. I mean, I don't feel that either one. I mean, I don't know. I was talking about this subject with a friend of mine the other day, anticipating this podcast. And, I was thinking, okay, so if you get a group of social people together and they all smoke marijuana, the worst thing that's probably going to happen is they're going to come up with some really stupid ideas and eat bad food. This is going to happen. They're all going to enjoy it. It's going to be a giggle fest probably. Now, if you do the same thing with alcohol, you know what happens? Unwanted pregnancy and violence. Okay? These, like, it's not a given, like you're automatically going to have A or B if you get drunk, but those seem to be the side effects. You know what I mean? Like, people get way more rowdy when they drink than they do on marijuana. I would say make worse decisions, although I would also say that people on marijuana rarely actually make decisions while they're on marijuana. They might debate thoughts, but they don't really make decisions. So realistically, I mean, if you look at the social impact of A versus B as far as like interactions of people, I think marijuana wins the fight as far as, the positive negative of if you just have a whole, like, if comparing like hookah bars were not tobacco, but marijuana versus a regular bar, I think the bouncer is going to get a lot less work in the hookah bar. And your comparison to like prescription drugs really got me thinking. I mean, the side effects of a lot of these prescription drugs, and not to say that marijuana can take the place of a prescription drug, but just looking at what they do and they're still legal, what they can do to people. I mean, it's so much worse. Like I watch some of these commercials for prescription drugs and I'm like, okay, it helps with restless leg syndrome, but what if it does any of these other things to me? Like, it seems like you're trading, a stub toe, because I don't want a stub toe anymore, for possibly a broken leg, because they can be so extreme, so bad. I mean, I know those are probably in a small number of cases, but still, if you compare that to marijuana and like the side effects, it seems like there's no comparison, really.
Yeah, I know there are a lot of times the ones that really have some of the scariest side effects are typically drugs that affect brain chemistry. And those ones are going to be ones you'll hear, if you have suicidal thoughts or tendencies when on this drug, discontinue, talk to your doctor right away, those type of things. Those ones are normally ones that affect how your brain sends and receives chemical messages. And so that's normally something as funny in that brain chemistry that's causing it. Now, obviously, I am not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I have no credentials aside from my tiny little my technician's license, which pretty much says, "Hey, you know how to count."
Right. You know how to read and then count again and reread.
There you go. That's all I do is as a tech. I don't do that much, and being in management, I do it even less.
Right.
I more manage, and then, oh my gosh, the pharmacy's falling apart. Go back there and help. I obviously I don't know the specifics on. From what I understand, if you smoke marijuana, or because it's delivered in lots of different forms, which is very common with lots of drugs. Drugs can come in all different kinds of forms. Um, and if you use marijuana, it tends to be a depressant, and so not as in it makes you depressed, but that it slows down your heart rate. It can make you tired. It tends to make you lethargic. Thoughts don't necessarily come as quickly. You have a slower reaction time. Things like that. That's not the same for everybody. Some people, depressants don't do that. They actually tend to hype them up. But it depends. Um, in general, I guess I would find it hard to believe that one of the side effects of marijuana is, you know, that you might have thoughts of suicide. But again, I don't know.
Right, right. Um, I would agree. I mean, there must be cases and specific individuals where it would be counterproductive to thoughts like that. As far as maybe someone who's already at risk, the way that the marijuana affects them could increase that. But the same could be said for alcohol, any number of prescription drugs, any number of things.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not a black and white issue, and there seems to be, I mean, all the comparisons we seem to have already done versus things that are already legal that fall under the category of drugs seem to, I mean, I feel, at least from my perspective, that it's almost like a wash as far as trying to compare them. It really doesn't, you can't say that marijuana is worse than things that are already legal.
So I guess I don't want to say that if we legalize marijuana, therefore we have to legalize all illegal drugs. But what would you say is the difference between something like marijuana and saying that it's okay to legalize marijuana, not necessarily in all instances, but even for just medicinal purposes, as opposed to legalizing something like heroin or cocaine?
Well, heroin or cocaine, from what I understand, and again, no credentials, um, you could die every time you use it. Heroin, I mean, I think people can smoke it. I think you can snort it. And then, of course, the most popularized version, that's probably not the right way to do it, but the thing you see in movies most is people that inject it. Um, there's a variety of ways, but if you're talking about injecting heroin, that's the kind of thing. The last study I remember, and this was a long time ago, and things may have improved significantly, but 99.9% of people that ever injected it died still using. Not necessarily from it, but still,
They were
you know,
when yeah they would end up using it for the rest of their life essentially.
right, right. So I think it's just a difference, like you were talking about the C1, C2, C3, C4, C5 categories of drugs. Um, I think when you're talking about heroin or cocaine, since C1 is illegal, but C2 is probably the strongest and most monitored drugs. I think both heroin and cocaine, if legal, would definitely be C2s, where I feel like marijuana would fall down like probably like a C4, C5, probably C4. Definitely not C2 though. They'd definitely be in two different categories.
Yeah, I mean to kind of give, like, for example, something like oxycodone, which has kind of a euphoric effect. At least it does when I take it. When I had my wisdom teeth removed, I got prescribed oxycodone, and it gave me at least a very euphoric effect every time I would take it. And so I assume from what the little bit of research I read in the little pamphlet I got with it, that's pretty common. It gives you this kind of like, everything is going to be all right in the world type feeling, which is good after you've had bones ripped out of your mouth. Um, but yeah, I mean, and that's a C2, but something like a hydrocodone, um, which is also for pain relief, much like oxycodone is. is a C3 or a C4, depending on how much acetaminophen is in it. But I like this. It makes it kind of sound like I know what I'm talking about.
And oxycodone works for like 8 or 10 hours too, doesn't it?
It lasts for a little while. A lot of the times I would take it, and then 3 or 4 hours in, I would get tired and probably fall asleep. But I would always stay. I would always stick around. Like I wouldn't take it right before I went to bed. Only, and this kind of sounds bad. I wouldn't take it right before I went to bed only because I really liked that euphoric feeling I would get. And so I would always take it a few hours before I was going to bed so I could get that feeling before I went to bed.
Well, it's an opiate. It's,
It,
morphine, heroin. Um, there's a couple other opium, just normal opium is a street drug that, kind of the most rudimentary form of all of it, I believe. I think hash is somewhere in the middle, but don't quote me on that. That could be completely wrong. But there's a variety of like prescription drugs that are opiates, and it's really, really common for people to get addicted to them
yeah.
because they are very enjoyable and they are actually physically addictive. So if
Yes.
you take them for an extended period of time and you stop, it's not just that the good feeling goes away, it is now replaced with the bad feelings when you lose something you're addicted to. Um, so it's a dangerous drug.
When I was talking with my father-in-law after I got the drugs because I was in a decent amount of pain, and so I was taking them on a daily basis. And I had mentioned, that I liked the fact that it had this euphoric feeling, and he goes, "Oh, yeah, oxycodone. That's the same stuff that Rush Limbaugh was addicted to um, when oh man, 90s maybe the early aughts when he had a big kind of drug. I'm using quotation marks drug scandal that he was addicted to something. Uh,
Yeah, I want to say 10 years ago, give or take,
yeah,
but
it was a while ago, and I don't remember. And you know, anytime it's we're going off of one addiction with the MMO and like talking a little bit about addiction here. Anytime anybody struggles with addiction, I don't give a crap what your politics are, what your religion are, religion is, or anything. If you're struggling with an addiction, my heart goes out to you. As somebody who doesn't really get addicted to things, I've had family members who struggle with addiction, and so my heart always will go out to you, and I want you to get help, or I am willing to help you get help. Um, so yeah,
yeah, I mean, it's always scary, or something like that. Whether it's something that's already legal, like, an alcohol, which, there are alcoholics all over the place. I mean, both my parents were alcoholics. I have a lot of friends that, we all kind of, the people that I hung out with in my 20s, we drank a lot in my early 20s. Unfortunately, there's some people that basically 2 decades later are still drinking the same amount.
mm,
And that's just scary to me. Like, I mean, when I look back, I did some dumb things in my early 20s, which I guess is the time you're supposed to do dumb things. Um, but, that's all in my past. But whether it's prescription drugs, marijuana, MMOs, gambling, whatever it is scary. And it's that kind of lost control, like when all of a sudden it's got more power over you than you have over it. That's when it's time to, reach out. And in a lot of ways, we live in an awesome world for that because all you need to do is go to Google and type in a simple search. And for any of these things, any of those addictions, you're going to find resources and they're going to be right there pretty much at the top of the page for you. And there's going to be some group of individuals um, who have gone to school and have the ability to help you and or have experienced what you are experiencing and have overcome it on their own or at least come to a point where they can live with it because certain addictions you never completely overcome, you
yeah,
just live
you live
without
with the
succumbing to
addiction,
them.
right?
Yeah, and you just it's there, you want it, but you've developed the tools to be able to say no, I'm not going to go gamble today or I'm
Right.
not going to have a drink today, whatever it is. But it is right there, and it's It's probably not as easy as I make it sound just typing a Google search. But for those that are ready and willing to get help, it can be just that easy.
Yeah, and it only ever requires that first step. I mean, obviously there's lots of work after the fact, but at least taking that first step, and that's one of those reasons why I I'm not necessarily in favor of a blanket kind of legalization of all drugs. I've heard some people talk about, a lot of drug crime, not drug crime, but drugs as a crime, using such being a victimless crime a lot of times. Because there's nobody who's getting the money taken from them or anything, and I don't know if that's always the truth. I mean, even if we stamped out all heck, you know what? Let's just make it very simple. Alcohol and nicotine are both legal drugs that you can put in your system as much as you want for the most part, provided you're not with at least alcohol. Provided you're not driving, you can drink as much as you want. There's nothing that stops you from drinking as much as you want in your own home. But there are other people in your friends, your family who are going to be around you who will suffer from someone who is an alcoholic. They will, and that's one of those reasons that even with legal drugs, um, and why it's not necessarily an answer to legalize everything. Um, that it is there are victims of uh, those kinds of addictions.
Indeed, indeed. I think changing the laws in regards to sentencing for usage of drugs is probably maybe overdue.
Mm,
I'm not familiar enough with them to really place a solid argument on this is what it is and this is what it should be. But there's a lot of just drug users that are in our prisons, and that's something I think I mean, you're getting into the mental health stuff like we talked about when we were talking about
gun control and Sandy Hook and
right, and like because addiction is it is a mental health condition. Your subjectiveness. The if you are subject to addiction, that is a mental weakness that we carry. I carry it. I smoke cigarettes. I used to drink more than I do. I don't know if I ever made it to alcoholic status. Having had parents who were alcoholics was always kind of like a bell that would go off in my head.
uh,
And it would just be like, I'm just not going to drink for a few weeks. If I ever felt like, yeah, I've been drinking a lot, even in my 20s when I drank too much. Um,
I guess I would probably say if you feel like in your head you can say no to something and it not like if you say I'm just not going to drink today and you don't have to really fight with yourself on it, then you're probably not addicted to whatever that is.
yeah, and with alcohol for me, it's I never have to ever. I could say right now I won't drink again until February, and that wouldn't be a problem if I wanted to make that commitment to myself. Um, I probably right now drink once a week.
Okay.
Have two, maybe three drinks, and that's about it. And I couldn't even tell you if that's accurate. It might be a little bit more one week, and I might miss 2 weeks. Um, Cigarettes is probably the one addiction I have that I couldn't just say I am not going to smoke today.
Right.
On a day when I work, I probably smoke, we'll say 10 cigarettes. I might smoke a little more on days when I don't work, but now that it's so cold out, not so much that I don't smoke in the house. But that is the one addiction that has got me by the short and curlies, as they say.
So that's it. Nice. I've never heard that before. Have you, at risk of starting a completely new conversation at the very end of our podcast, have you ever tried or given thought to using one of the e-cigarettes?
I have, and I've been flirting with the idea even more recently. And if and when I do make that switch over, we can do an episode about it,
I
or
would
at least
be that would be a great one because I have bought and used e-cigarettes, and I don't smoke, just to see what they were like, so that when people would ask me, I could, and I would always clarify. I'm like, I'm not a smoker. I didn't smoke before I tried them. I bought 2 in a year and a half,
Right.
and I haven't even finished the second one. So,
Yeah, they're, I've tried them, and it is different. It'd be about getting used to that difference.
yeah,
That's pretty much the only thing, because they taste different, they smoke different.
yeah, they miss the flavor. There's a flavor of that tobacco, um, that is in the cigarettes that you don't really have from the glycol flavoring and the nicotine kind of vaporizer that you get when you use an e-cig.
Right, but all that stuff is just secondary things that are connected to your addiction to the nicotine.
Mm.
So it takes effort and time and commitment, but you can, switch over those tendencies to something else. It's like the ability to chew nicotine gum. People get addicted to nicotine gum because they just transfer their addiction from, the smoking of cigarettes and the flavor and the habit and all the oral fixation of that over to the gum.
Right.
So it's the same addiction, it's just been converted.
I will say though that the e-cigarette is more healthy for you.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. So I would challenge you, just because I want you to be around for a while, to switch over to the e-cigs.
Yeah, I really should. It's a good point. I will promise before we do our next podcast that I will at least have some research done on the subject.
All right. Well, fair enough. We'll come up with something that I have to do. I'm already losing weight, so I've been calorie counting, which is why I haven't been drinking a lot lately. Normally, I would drink probably about as much as you do, maybe once a week. After a tough day at work or something, I'd come home and have a shot of something with, with a Diet Pepsi or something, not just give me a shot.
Yeah,
Um,
where's the Everclear?
yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, so I've been trying to lose weight, and I've been counting calories, and so I that's why I haven't been drinking, because it's just empty calories you don't get anything for.
Right, not willing to spend the number of calories. The drink's not worth it, right?
Exactly, exactly. So, well, we have gone over our time like normal.
Yeah, it's what we
So
do around here.
that's just the way we roll. But that was good. I enjoyed it. I think we got a little off topic on marijuana legalization, but I think we hit the high points. I'm sure we'll come back and talk about it again, especially as long as Illinois is continuing to talk about it and more states are slowly adopting it. I'm sure in the coming years, our federal government is going to probably be re-examining it, changing our laws a little bit. It's one of those things I kind of view in the same light as I do marriage equality. That I think our laws are going to change in the coming years regarding these things. I just couldn't tell you specifically when or what kind of conversations we're going to go through in the next decade over this
Yeah,
stuff.
but they both have that kind of momentum.
Yeah, they certainly do. But yeah, so we are episode 8. Yes,
I think that is correct.
we are on episode 8. That's just about 2 months worth of videos, and I've really enjoying it. I hope you guys continue to listen. James and I will continue to make these podcasts as well. Probably even if no one else is listening, we'll probably still make the podcast. But we enjoy having you guys listen and get back to us and send us emails and comment on the Facebook page, comment on the YouTube videos. We do, James and I, we both read those. Ask us questions, things you want clarification on. We'll be more than happy to either address it in the next show, or even if it's something we can answer quick, we might even respond back to you in another comment. So yeah, that's all I've got. James, got anything you want to wrap up with?
I would like to apologize for 2 things. I have not mentioned Sweden in several episodes, so I just like to say Sweden, 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 where marijuana is illegal. And MMO addiction is probably as bad as anywhere else in the world. And I would also like to apologize for Justin and his credentials that he brought with him today. We have promised to have no credentials, but every now and again, it turns out that we actually have a couple. Beyond that, thanks everyone for listening to the show, and you'll be hearing from us again next week.